Yeah,
right.
yeah,
But
Chris, you got your license, dude.
Yeah, fuck. I read that in your book, Chris. Chris, when I read your book, I read that in the preface. Yeah, so.
Well, I was a defensive player.
Chris's book is titled "Fuck You."
I like that. That will fuck you.
Tim,
That will get unfucked.
Tim, it also says, fuck you, I scored 20 goals.
yeah. It's like real small writing. Yeah.
When I stepped on the ice, I never backed down, and I never stayed down.
And I was vicious, and I was malicious, and I don't care.
I'm alive. He's a freaking madman. Look at him going to town. That'll be a suspension.
Anita, welcome to the show. Awesome stuff. Listen, you're coming out with a new book, Unfuck Your Life and Relationships. And Anita, this book is coming out December 6th, I believe. You can get it at Simon & Schuster website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, BAM, Books A Million, B, Bookshop, IndieBound, to name a few. And people can also follow Anita on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube under Ask Anita Astley. You can also go to her website, www.askanitaastley.com. And we have Anita here today, and we're going to ask her some things. No question about it.
I'm ready. Let's go.
Welcome
Let's get unfucked,
show.
right? Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for having me on, Tim. I'm excited. You know,
We
I'm a Habs
certainly,
fan, and I'm
there's a
originally
lot
from
of-
Montreal. Sorry, you know that, right? I'm a Habs fan, originally from Montreal. So I really admire.
I thought you
everything
were
you've
originally from India. I thought you were
Well,
originally
you know,
from
that's
India.
going way back, but I've, identify as a Canadian.
Hey,
Canadian,
well,
Indian,
we're going
American.
way back today. That's
Let's
where
do
we
it.
start today. We start way back today. We're not going to let you off the hook. You think?
Yeah, we're not going to talk about the
Hey.
Canadians all day. I got to listen to the
No,
Canadians
no.
every episode we do.
All right.
We're not going to.
Yeah.
Listen,
You think I'm
I
gonna
can talk
let-
about anything and everything, so let's do it.
Yeah, let's rock.
Do you think I'm going to let you off the hook with Dr. Frank? You think Dr. Frank's the only one that's going to get to psychoanalyze you? Knuckles
all
is going to
right.
do the psychoanalyzing today.
I'm scared.
No. All right. Anita, again, listen, I read the book, and it goes back to the beginning with you. And anytime I have someone on this podcast, Tim and I love to go back to the beginning because it tells family of origin tells so much about a person.
Yes.
I've had the opportunity to do a little of that work myself, but it tells so much about that person and how where their journey began and how they ended up where they are, how they ended up having to get unfucked. So
Right.
Let's go back to the beginning in India.
Okay. Wow. You're really talking about the beginning. Okay. So I was born in India in a small village near a table in the
Yeah.
house. And then I'm a middle child. I have an older brother and I have a younger brother, which you know, Sunil. Give him a shout out. And then I grew up in a
Yeah.
very patriarchal culture. I grew up in India. We migrated to Germany. I'm going to try to condense it all because there's a long story.
Yeah, that's fine.
You can read
Yeah.
it in the book. And then we ended up in Montreal, Canada. And then I have moved since then to upstate New York. And now I live in Brookfield, Wisconsin. So it's been a long journey, though, because as you know, you and I, Chris, talked earlier, I grew up with this bicultural identity conflict. You know, my parents were very traditional Indian. We were a very traditional Indian family, but I was growing up in Pierrefonds in Montreal, and I just wanted to be like everyone else. I wanted to adapt to mainstream culture, and my family had a really hard time with it, and particularly my father, who, even though he enjoyed traveling and was, I think, ultimately content that he did migrate and was able to give his children better opportunities opportunities he didn't have. But I think psychologically it worked against him because he left all his family behind. And, you can read all about that in my book in terms of what he struggled with, his own demons, and what men struggle with, as I find in my private practice, depression, which often goes unrecognized, undiagnosed, and of course, untreated, and that manifests itself in so many different ways.
Yeah, well, so you move from India, Germany, and then you come to Montreal. You end up going to McGill,
Yeah.
and graduating, and you set up a nice practice for yourself today. But when you talk about those times growing up in Montreal and the cultural things you had to deal with through your dad, like the difficulty of that. Now, from my understanding, in Indian culture, I watched what's her name, Auntie Sim. It was about Indian relationships, matchmaking, Indian matchmaking on Netflix.
Yes,
and there are arranged marriages in that culture, and that's something you had to deal with. No.
Yes, it's the norm. I think it's changed. Well, it is changing. It's a bit more progressive, or I think women have some say in whether they want to marry the person that's been brought to them. There's a bit of a courting process, but I grew up with the message that nice Indian girls don't date, and when you're ready, we will marry you, particularly from my father. And I did not, that did not sit well with me because I was just trying to be a normal Canadian girl, teenager, and that caused a lot of friction within my family, particularly with my dad. My dad, I think, had trouble integrating more into the culture than my mom did. My mom was pretty easygoing. Of course, she compensated. In families, we always have that one parent who's stricter than the other, and the other one compensates for the other's strictness. And my dad totally was. Like, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. Of course, I did. I sneaked out and did all kinds of stuff, but I wish I didn't have to do that, but I had to. It was my coping mechanism.
Did you learn French?
Oui, je parle français.
Can you speak French?
Oui.
Oh, okay. It's better than Chris's, that's for sure.
Chris, tu parles pas français. Well, he's from Boston,
Oui, je parle un petit peu français, mademoiselle.
Tu parles un petit peu, oui. Bien sûr.
Oui, je comprends un plus de parle.
Okay, Chris. We better switch back to English.
yeah, I don't understand anything.
But sure, Tim, and you're throwing bombs out at me. You bastard. So
it's difficult. Right. It's difficult growing up in two cultures.
Let's say this.
Yeah.
Yeah, those two cultures difficult. So say I worked with your dad back in the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I come in contact with you, and I'm like, Anita, how are you? We go on a date, and then it becomes much more, and we say, geez, we want to get married. Your father wouldn't accept that. And he definitely wouldn't arrange for me to marry you.
Definitely not, Chris. I would not have introduced you to my father. My father made it very clear that I was not allowed to talk to boys. They were not allowed to come to the house. None of that happened in my life. So one of the best things I did, I don't want to villainize him. He only did what he knew how to do. That's in the book. And I strongly share that with other people, that the book and my story and therapy is not about bashing our parents. It is trying to understand where we've come from, trying to explore the past in order to make changes in our lives that need to be made. Because my parents did the best that they could with what they had, and they were dealing with their own issues. So it's not about bashing them. It's more trying to understand their own journey. And as an adult woman, I can do that now. I wasn't able to do that then because obviously I was struggling with my own issues with identity and so forth. So getting back to your question, I would never have done that. The best thing I did, as I was saying, I got a job. And that allowed me to get out of the house and, see boys, go to the mall, do all that kind of stuff. But that was not even an option to think, oh, my God, am I going to bring Chris home? Is Daddy going to like him? No fucking way.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. I would be killed.
See you fucking later.
No, I would be killed. You would be killed and we would both be dead.
Oh, well, I'm
sorry,
glad that
Chris.
didn't happen now. Thank you. God, imagine.
We'll avoid that.
I thought it was bad going to ask the hand in marriage of my ex-wife from my father-in-law. So I think
in the Indian culture, it's the parents who ask, not the boy or the girl. It's the parents.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a little bit more progressive.
Relationships.
Now. Yes.
Yeah. So relationships. Okay. What makes a healthy relationship, I guess? Let's start with that. What makes a healthy relationship? Is there any criteria per se that, these three things, you got it made?
Well, there's no magic formula, right? I mean, I talk about those basic things in this book, what we need to do to get back to building healthy relationships. There are certain things that I believe do need to be in place for that to happen, and I talk about that in the book. But I really want to talk about the primary relationship, which is the relationship which we have with ourselves. I often come across people. And there, by the way, I just want to say, when we talk about relationships, we are talking about a variety of relationships. People come to me and say, well, I don't, because I ask them, how are the relationships in your life? And they say, well, I don't have one. I'm like, dude, you totally do. A relationship is not exclusive to a romantic relationship. We have the primary relationship is with the self, us. And then we have relationships with everybody that's in our life, our families, siblings, co-workers, Tim, Chris, you guys together. So relationships are everywhere. We cannot escape them. We are born into relationships. And once we leave home, what do? We seek other relationships. I believe we're hardwired. We're social animals. We need that intimacy, the emotional intimacy. So getting back to your question, we need to work on ourselves first. It is the cornerstone.
No, I like that. I like that because I work with a therapist. I think, man, I don't know where to start, but no, and I do because I eventually
you're fucked.
Yeah, I was somebody who was not good. In my head, I'm not good enough. I'm not, self-acceptance.
Inadequate,
and for me, things have been better in my life with my wife and things like that. But you have to really love yourself and trust yourself before you can go do that with anybody, I think. But you can't sometimes. I mean, I just think you can't do any of this by yourself. It's my
And I'm
right. I don't know.
Well, some people, we have different types of coping mechanisms, and everybody does. But I want to first say thank you for sharing that. And I think the more men that come out and share that they are in therapy, it'll make it easier for other men to seek therapy and talk about their own therapy. That still in 2022, I come across men who still feel it's a weakness. They're ashamed to say that they have to go see somebody, or they're ashamed that they're struggling with their emotions and they should be the alpha male and be able to do it all. So I'm glad to hear that you're doing that, and thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it is sometimes we need to go to someone to unfuck our minds and ourselves. And getting back to Chris, what you were saying, we are all fucked up. It's just different degrees of fucked upness. And we just have very different coping mechanisms. And some people need to get some help. So there's nothing wrong with that. So it starts with, what you were saying, self-awareness. We have to know our shit, and then we have to own it. We have to work on ourselves. Because if we don't do that, what do? We go around spewing it on other people. And then some people do that repeatedly. And they have a graveyard of relationships. And I always think, well, it can't be everyone. So what the fuck is going on with you? And people often are, what do you mean? Me? It's not me, it's them. They externalize everything, meaning everything is somebody else's fault. But at some point, if your relationships are mostly not working out, then it's you. And you've got to look in the mirror and start working on yourself, asking yourself those questions.
Basically, that the negative consequences come from that poor relationship with oneself, right? And
yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm yes, I believe so too. I can be the guy that I'm the problem, but I'm going to blame everyone else.
Yeah.
For which the problem is me, but I can't fix the problem with I can't fix me. That's why I do what I do, because like you said, it's about owning up and being honest, and no one's perfect. I love everything you're saying, for sure.
Yeah, no one is perfect. And you're saying you can't fix you. Well, you can by starting, and you are, I want to say, Tim, by owning that, a lot of the stuff you have to work on yourself. And I want to talk about an important concept. I don't want to get all clinical and blah, blah, blah. But I think projection is one of the most important things that we need to work on, which is, and I'll define it very quickly. Projection is when we misinterpret something as coming from the outside when it's really coming from the inside, meaning we blame other people, but it's really our own issue. Somewhere in our family of origin, we have learned that it's not acceptable to share negative thoughts, negative feelings, and negative behavior. So we put it onto somebody else. A simple example is if I'm feeling really angry, and I've, somewhere learned unconsciously that, you can't express anger. It's horrible. I might say to Chris, you look really angry right now. And Chris might be like, well, no, I'm not feeling angry. I don't think I look angry. I'm not doing anything that says I'm angry. It's because I can't say, I'm fucking angry at you, Chris, for what you did.
You put it on me.
I put it on you rather than saying, hey, wait a minute, I'm angry. I have to own my anger and deal with it and learn to become comfortable with aggressive feelings. A lot of people are not. And you know what? The people that really irk me are people who say, oh, I'm not aggressive. I'm just, I'm like, yeah, fuck, you're probably very passive aggressive because you want to make me be even more aggressive. Why? Because you can't own your aggression. We by nature are aggressive and it's okay. We are hardwired to be. And there's a reason for that. There's a self-protection. But when it starts to drip into our relationships and we start projecting and becoming passive aggressive is when we cannot own our ship. And we don't see what's going on within ourselves.
I've been dying to ask this question, maybe so I can sound smart and not like a dumb hockey player.
You're not.
I'm curious, when in reading your book, you talked about general IQ and relational IQ. General IQ being the measure of a person's reasoning ability, and then relational IQ, explore, understand how we relate to others, and we adjust our behavior based on individual or social interactions. Now, that being said, is there any correlation between someone with a high general IQ and like having a low relational IQ? You know how some people are so book smart there, and then it comes to dealing with people and they're fucked.
They're not really good at it. Well, I don't want to quantify that with a number or say there's a positive or negative correlation or relationship. What I will say is that when that IQ is higher than the relational IQ, and sometimes that happens. I don't want to make a grand generalization. It's because we compensate on one side, and people do. We all by nature compensate somewhere in our lives to make up for a blind spot that we have. So it could be true. In my experience, clinically speaking, it is generally true. I have people come in who are very successful, CEOs, running companies, and then they come in with these issues. And I think, oh my God, that just seems very basic to me, not just because I'm a therapist, but they don't see it at the level that I see it at. And that's because their relational IQ is not up to par with their intellectual IQ. And I talk about that in the book. Where does that come from? Where is our relational IQ coming from? What does it look like? And how do we navigate and negotiate with it in our lives? And it's a function of our family of origin and the successive relationships we have with people outside of that. So we carry around all this stuff from our family of origin, and most of us tend to repeat it in other relationships unless we realize, wait a minute, this stuff is not working for me. And I had to do that in my own relationships. It's pretty fucked up because it's intellectually, I know this, but emotionally it doesn't translate because I keep on doing the stupid things and it's not working. The result is the same. But again, it becomes about becoming aware of, what is my relational IQ? We tend to always think of IQ as quantitative and having to do with intellect, but we have to be attuned to other people in our lives. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to, as you said, Tim, fix ourselves or fix the relationship. And that's what I mean by relational IQ. Where are you in your relational IQ? And people need to evaluate that by evaluating their relationships.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, are you good?
No, I was just thinking in my head, what is it that why is it so hard to ask for help, right? Like, why is it like when it comes to like my career or everything in life, I can really thank a lot of people, but when it comes to me, it's like, I only understand me, no one else, you know what I mean? But the truth is like whatever I'm going through, there's a lot of, you're not alone, right? Like that's what I'm finding out, right? Like it's like not alone, but like, what is it that, is it, it's a scary, it's an important topic. Is like that first step to ask for help. I don't know what it is, but a lot of people just don't want to do it. I didn't want to do it for a long time, but. And
what stopped you? Can I ask you, what was the barrier for you? You it sounds like you knew that you needed help. Fear of?
Yes.
Fear of
fear of rejection.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
like just like fear of like, I don't know, codependency, worrying about, so much what people think. But the truth is like, like over time in the past few years, been doing this. It's like my life, I've been less reactive to things. I've been more just, responding and like just kind of being, like you said, owning up. But the fear was probably just, I don't know. It's a good question. It's like, I'm failing if I go get help. Right.
Yeah. It's a great comment that you're making.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because fear is what keeps people from getting help, and particularly men. And men, we're in you guys are hockey players. I can't even imagine what it's like to have that persona publicly and privately be suffering. And then how do you go and ask for help when you're the enforcer? You're there out, to protect your team and beat up people. How are you going to go to somebody and say, hey, this is what I do, but inside I'm this scared little boy. I hate going out on the ice, knowing that I have to go beat somebody up. Yes,
I'm not a scared little boy.
We all are. We all are at some point.
That.
Sorry, Chris. I got news for you.
No.
Getting back to that. Wait. Let me finish. Getting back to that scared little boy.
Okay.
I want to talk about this concept of the inner child. I talk about that in the book.
My inner child. I was just going to say that. My inner child. I want to hold him and hug him and kiss him and love him and say,
you can.
You're a good little boy. Oh,
you can
it out,
and you should.
Fucker.
Chris, you can and you should.
No.
Our we all have an inner child, okay? And what is the inner child? It is that child that we know very well who has certain triggers. And when they get triggered, we regress to those parts of our lives. And sometimes we don't handle things too well. So I say, listen, we got to work out that inner child's problem. We got to talk to him or her. I embrace mine and I love my inner child, but I put her fucking back in her place when she's trying to govern my adult life. Your inner child, my whole point is, doesn't have to and shouldn't govern your adult life. Just know that I know she's there. And I know she gets triggered when, my issues or whatever, I'm feeling a certain way, but I know that she needs to go back. And this is the adult Anita who's worked on all her issues, mostly who needs to make adult decisions. And you talk about fear. Fear is a huge part of mental health and trying to get the help we need. Fear is a barrier, particularly for men, because we're afraid to really look into ourselves, what's going on in our psyche, and what happens if we unravel. People ask me that all the time. And they say to me, Anita, I was afraid to come in here, and sometimes our sessions are scary. And I'm afraid that sometimes I actually feel worse after our sessions than I ever have felt before. And I think, okay. And I normalize that. I said, of course, because out of my office, you can walk around in the world and you can hide all those things that you do to get you to be functional, which is what we want. But when we're in here, we talk about all those things that you're scared to talk about out there, and you're scared to face yourself, and you're scared to confront other people in your life and to get to the other side. I believe fear it keeps us from going where we want to go in life. And it's keeps us from acknowledging and working on ourselves, and particularly men. In my experience in working with male population, that's the number one thing. People, who's going to find out that I'm in here? I've had actually men come in and say, well, can I wait in my car? Because what if I see somebody in the office or here? I'm like, dude, I can't control the whole environment, right? If that's going to make you more comfortable, I will do that because I want you to be in here. But can we just start working on that? Like, take the stigma off. Oh my God, I'm in a therapist waiting room. What if somebody sees me? And I want to bring that back to, if you're Chris Nyland, the hockey player, when you were out, even now, if somebody sees you, you might be thinking, hey, Anita, can you set it up so I don't have to encounter people and they'll know that I'm in therapy? And I think, well, okay, we're going to work on that, because what's the shame in it? And I know, Chris,
That's
from learning about you that, you've worked on a lot of issues yourself also. So I'm just saying, way back when, if you think about when you started your process, fear was probably one of the governing things that was keeping you from doing what you needed to do and wanted to do.
I was going to say, it's funny because most men and friends that I've said, yeah, I see a therapist, most of them are like, man, I should see one. You know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of funny that That's how it is. Like we think like that as men, but the truth, it's so opposite. Like I think a lot of people want to get help, but they're afraid to, right? They think
they
what
are
everyone else
Stigma.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a stigma.
That-
And we all talk about it. And we all hear it in the news with athletes, all kinds of things they're
Still
struggling
reluctant.
with. They're very reluctant to come forward. So, Chris, I want to say I watched the documentary on you, and I was really, I want to say kudos to you that you've come out and talked about a lot of your issues and struggles during your career, post-career. It takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And again, you said it earlier, the pain, people go to the office, they feel that pain. Listen, I believe it. No pain, no gain. You don't get over things. You get through them. You work your way through them. And I understood that only through therapy, because it was always like, get over it, fucking suck it up, keep moving on, And as far as, that little boy with all the fear, I know where that came from too, like very well.
Yeah.
At the time when I was going through everything, and I was doing my job as a player, I didn't understand where the fear aspect with how that played into it.
Yeah.
And only when I took a step back from it all and I was able to look at it from the balcony, if you will.
Yes. Yeah.
I was able to understand it more. But I also, and it's just not all fear-based or fear-driven what I did when I look back, because quite frankly, it takes a lot of inner courage to go out there and put yourself on the line for somebody else in a physical way.
Yes.
And that is not just fear. There's a combination of things going on there, but I understand the certainly the fear part and the anger part. I do.
So can I ask
I'm
you?
sure you could enlighten me even more so, but
No, that's your story and your journey, right? I mean, what sounds like you looked at yourself from, in therapy, we call ego position. It's looking outside of ourselves, almost at ourselves, to see how we're behaving and what is it that we're trying to communicate to others and to ourselves. But I also want to talk about the relationships, as a professional athlete, how complicated it makes your relationships, not only, the primary one with yourself and also the people around you, and trying to navigate the private world with the professional world and trying to figure out what the heck is going on with me? How do I do all of this? And then fucking it up. Like, the relationships are not working. Perhaps it's infidelity. There's substance abuse that you talk about very openly. And I think that's very common. Well, from my experience, it's very common when you're alone and you're lonely. People are at high risk for using substance and alcohol to deal with the pain, because first there is the pain. You're the enforcer, so you're in friggin' pain, right? So you got to deal with that. And then it's very easy. That's a very slippery slope to say, well, this helps me physically, but wait a minute, it's kind of now helping me emotionally. And men do that often. They use substance to numb themselves. And people will say to me, well, my husband doesn't feel anything. I'm like, no. He's saying he's numb. He feels an enormous amount of emotions. That's why his body's like, dude, shut the fuck up. I can't deal with it.
He doesn't want to feel.
It's easier not to feel.
It's actually the opposite. It's an overwhelming the system where it becomes numb. You actually feel so much that you don't feel anything, if that makes any sense. And then you use stuff to help yourself, right?
It's dangerous. It's a
very dangerous
time.
Yeah.
That's when you can get dependent on things, and definitely, it's scary for sure. Anyways, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay.
Absolutely.
When you talk about that, and for sure, I look at my own situation, retirement, difficult time transitioning, lost little boy.
Yeah.
And then being married, having 3 children. There was infidelity, which I'm not proud of. I took certainly that after getting addicted to the medication and being where I was. Yeah. And then destroying my marriage over it. Yeah. That and the infidelity. I was I was so full of shame and guilt. Yeah. That it was so overwhelming. I went deeper into addiction. Like I thought I was bad then. Yeah. I went so far down the scale
Yeah.
because I was having a hard time with myself, that
Yes.
my own, I was ashamed of myself. The pain was enormous. Like, it's just overwhelming. And that kept me in my addiction longer. And until I was able to, get treated physically first.
Yes.
And then mentally second, and then spiritually third, I was a mere shadow of myself.
Yeah, you lost yourself in all of that, and you were just trying to deal with your pain, your physical, and then ultimately your emotional pain. And the shame and guilt behind all of that is enormous. So I'm really pleased that you're able to get the proper help that you needed. But sometimes some people are not able to get there. And that's a very dark place to be. That's why doing podcasts like this, bringing awareness to mental health, we need to do that, because people, pay lip service to it. We hear about it all the time when somebody commits suicide, a professional athletes, we've been hearing about that. But nothing is really done about it. And I think, well, we have these professional leagues and teams and associations who have a lot of money. And then we have, on those teams, we have a dietitian, we have a rehab person. You guys know more about this than I do. But I'm like, where the fuck is a mental health practitioner? Why is there not a therapist on this team traveling with these guys and women who have all of this stress to perform, to, people look at you guys, professional hockey players or basketball players, any athlete who's in that league, and we see the only one dimension. There's so many other aspects that we don't see. And that just makes it harder to reach out and get help. But I think people, you owners out there, managers, get a therapist on board.
They're as fucked up as the players.
It's funny because it's like the game's 99% mental, and you know what I mean. They always say that. It's like life is 99%.
Yeah, I was just going to say life is 99.9% mental, and the other whatever people are lying. It's the body-mind connection. We can't separate the two. And when you're professional athletes and taking those hits, the mental pressure, the physical pressure, something has to break. You're human. We're all human. And it is all about managing our relationships with ourselves and everybody around us.
So what is the ideal? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what's the ideal relationship an athlete can have with themselves in your
an ideal relationship for athletes. Yeah. I would say in general, an ideal relationship we have with ourselves, male, female, is to know ourselves really well and what it takes for someone to push our buttons. And once those buttons are pushed, we need to be able to control our reaction. And you had mentioned earlier, Tim, about that you're less reactive and you're more proactive now. Congratulations, because that's the place we need to live in. I can say we can, and I used to be a very reactive, hot-headed person. It took me a long time, as if you read my book, when you read it, I went for 6 years. I think I was in psychoanalysis for 6 years, 2 times a week. Let me tell you something. You definitely get to know your shit really well, own it. And my Dr. Frank was awesome. He didn't tolerate any of my bullshit, because you can try to, if you have a good therapist, they're not going to let you get away with it. He was very sensitive and compassionate.
He was also sensitive to you, which I found like he was almost, like a dad should
fatherly. Be. Yeah, he was and therapists represent that. We are, parental figures, because, there's no such thing as a perfect parent. I'm a parent, and I'm sure I've fucked up lots of ways. And I always tell my kids when they're like, Mom, seriously? I'm like, listen, I'm just giving you stuff to talk about with your therapist. It can't be a perfect child. So we all fuck things up somehow. And then, therapists become very parental. We're looking for, I always sought his validation. Even now, when I finish the book, I won't give it away because it's near the end. I still seek his validation, because he became, after, you lock yourself up with a person for 6 years, twice a week, and you just share every thought and an emotion that you have. This becomes a vital person in your life. Even when the relationship ends, the therapeutic relationship stays with you. There are still moments in my life today that I think, oh yeah, that's from, when I was with Dr. Frank and we had talked about this. So I carry him around inside of me like a blanket. He's a security blanket. And I always go back to those sessions consciously and sometimes very unconsciously. So I just want to say the therapeutic relationship is such a different and unique relationship that it is probably one of the best relationships I've had in my life that helped me to move forward outside of the four walls of his office.
Yeah, it's fun. Your book, like even the title, I don't know if you had like unfuck your life. Your life's fucked. I looked at it like I'm naturally someone that wants to be like, fuck it. Like I don't want to, I avoid confrontation. So like where I get into trouble is like, I like to isolate and I like to, I don't want to deal with shit. So I'm like, my mind's always like, fuck this. Like, you know, but, I just spilled coffee everywhere.
Yeah.
But anyways, no, where I was going
nervous.
with it.
He's getting nervous.
It's okay.
I just start crying.
Okay.
He
no,
knocked
I'm
his
just
coffee over.
We're not allowed to cry.
You
but
are,
anyways,
you
no,
are.
I was just saying like,
that's the message.
Things
you've
have gotten better
internalized.
for me because I face, you know, I do take on confrontation. Doesn't mean I'm like arguing with people, but you know, I just think, that's the difference. I would say I'm still I mean, I don't know.
You're
I feel like
working
it's
on
like
it.
you're changing. Like people are different. It takes time for, you know, everyone's different. You know, but I think if you're changing, I don't know. It's like working on yourself. I don't think ever like you don't ever graduate. Like
no,
you just
it doesn't end. It only ends when you die. You know, it only ends when you die. And I want to just speak to what you're saying is, you know, often people don't want to confront. And I talk about this in the book. There's a whole chapter on conflict resolution, confrontation, and conflict. We need to accept that in our relationships, we will have conflict. There is no way out of that. You spend enough time with someone, you're going to have conflict. And what is conflict? It's very healthy, actually, to have conflict with someone. It is basically saying, I'm ready in this relationship to share my true thoughts and feelings with you. And we're not mere images of any other person. So of course we're going to differ. And when we have a conflict, which is a difference of opinion on something, it is an opportunity to, I said a couple of, it's not a bad thing. It's an absolutely fantastic thing that's happening in your relationship. It's an opportunity to increase your emotional intimacy, decrease the emotional intimacy, or keep it to where it is, which is status quo, that neither one of you are willing to go anywhere. Because once you're able to work through the conflict in a healthy manner, then you're like, okay, I can start being more and more of myself. And that's what we really want. In healthy relationships, so you guys asked me, what are the key things? We need to be able to be ourselves, our authentic selves. And a lot of the times people are trying to be what the other person wants them to be. It doesn't work. It's not going to be long lasting. You can only play that game for a short period of time until you have to confront, embrace conflict. I said, stop avoiding conflict and running away from it. Embrace it. It's part of building emotional intimacy. You have to. If I can't tell you what I think and feel, and we can't have, a little bit of friction over it and work it out, how's this a real relationship? That's fucked up.
I gotta get a towel. Like we'll edit. I'm gonna give me
go get a towel.
Second.
Go get a towel.
You guys keep going though.
Well, don't worry. Don't worry.
So you have to become comfortable with conflict. You have to become comfortable with confrontation. And let me tell you, confrontation in society has this negative association. It doesn't have to be something bad. It is not a fight. It is basically saying, hey, Chris, I'm not sure about this. It's not working well for me. What do you think? I'm going to confront you. But again, it's how I confront you. If I just attack you, like you're not doing this right, or you got to fix that, it's not going to work. It's how I approach you. I'm going to say, Chris, I'm not comfortable with the way this is going. I'm using I language. I'm taking ownership. I'm not saying you. I'm not attacking you. But that's what generally happens when people confront somebody. They right
get
away,
defensive.
they attack them. So if I say you, right away, I start finger pointing, you're going to be like, wait a minute. Then we are stuck in this attack defense mode. And that doesn't go anywhere well, because the more you feel attacked, the more defensive you're going to become. And the more defensive you become, the more I'm going to attack you. So we're stuck in this circular argument that's not breakable. But the only way to do it is to stop it and say, wait a minute, I am feeling this way. I'm going to take ownership of when this happens. And then you have room for a conversation.
Okay. It's funny. When I played for the Bruins, I went and took a couple college courses. Public speaking.
Yeah.
I got an A. Imagine.
Congratulations.
And then I took another one, mediation, negotiation, and conflict management. I got an A. I love those. I only wish I applied myself back when I was going to college and playing hockey. I had a hockey brain. I could care less about school. But that being said, and we look at the number of divorces today in the U.S., it's over 50% of marriages fail. We look at athletes and, you're in the limelight. You're playing hockey for whatever, 13, 14 years. All of a sudden it ends. So now you got to deal with all that. Plus your relationship, your family, your kids, those things. Why is that divorce rate so high when it comes to athletes, in your estimation?
Yeah, that's a big question. I'm from my experience, I will just speak for myself. I can't generalize. It's because I think for so many years, you focus on one thing, although it's multifactorial, being the best enforcer as you were, from what I know about your game and what the role that you played, you're putting
I
so
could
much.
score goals too. Stop.
Yeah, he had 20 goals one year.
I scored 20 goals.
Okay, all
He's
right.
told yeah.
So don't just, pigeonhole me. You're pigeonholing me.
10th episode we've heard.
I won't allow it. No.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got to read your book. I got to read your book. That you're focused so much on all of that it's very hard. And there's so much pressure. Not that there's not pressure in normal life. There absolutely is. But you are in the spotlight. There's all this pressure to perform. Everybody's watching you, literally counting on you. And then you're trying to deal with all of your emotions physically, your life emotionally on the ice, the other players and so forth, and wanting to do the best for your team. That how do you put some energy into a relationship? An athlete, if you get married really young and then all of a sudden you have this fame, you have this notoriety and everybody's coming to you. So that goes to the ego. You're only human, right? That is going to impact how you feel about your life and your world. And it's tempting. The temptations are out there. And then if you're not able to keep grounded in that relationship, of course it's going to fall apart. Absolutely. And the dialogue, you stop talking to each other because you start, the hockey becomes your marital partner. The sport becomes your marital partner. And then, of course, your marital partner is feeling neglected and you're not able to build any kind of emotional intimacy with them. Then the marriage does fall apart. All relationships, for me, ultimately fall apart when there's a lack of emotional intimacy. When people are not able to connect with each other emotionally, everything else is fleeting. Looks, sex, all that kind of stuff. It's fleeting. But if you cannot emotionally maintain a connection, then your relationship is at risk. And I think that's what happens. You put so much into the sport and you put so much of yourself into your teammates and everybody around you that how can you possibly have something left for your partner? And I think that over time, as you age, as an athlete, I can't speak for you, but from working with people who are, in that level, they reach a certain age of maturity where they can balance the two. But I think when you're young and you're in all of that, it's really difficult. I would think it's really difficult. You could probably speak more to that, Chris, than I can in terms of that side of the coin.
What was that?
Well, I mean, having all of that when you're at a young age, having all that notoriety, people know who you are. You can't walk down the street. Fame, the power of all of that, and being Chris Nyland, and I'm sure women giving you lots of attention, and then you have a wife at home, and you're young, like you have a young brain. You're trying to navigate and negotiate this situation, which most of us cannot relate to, right? We are putting our efforts into our work and then we go home and try to manage our relationships. But to be a professional athlete and to have all of that to navigate and negotiate, that makes it much more difficult to try to navigate and negotiate a personal relationship, I would think. That's been my experience.
Yeah, no, when I got done playing, I started slowly getting into like fear of losing everything, because hockey, it was like, that's all I knew. And
what's your identity, right? We talk about retirement and who are you afterwards? Because somebody just comes in, most jobs come in, replace us, and then we feel like, wait a minute. And most of us derive our identity from what we do in life. It's one of the first questions we ask somebody when we meet them. Hey, what do you do? And then right away, we have all these preconceived notions about that person, right or wrong, but that's what we do. That's what most people do. And our conversations revolve around that. And although a lot of people look forward to retirement, it is a stage of life that can be very depressing if we don't become active in other aspects of our lives and try to own some of that, because people look forward to it, but they're like, oh, now what? Now am I just waiting to die? No, there's a whole new process that begins.
Well, there's a difference. There's I believe there's a difference in that is the age difference. A lot of people retire 65, 70, whatever. But when you're retiring at 34 years old and what you love, what you do, what you know is taken away from you.
Yes.
Like, listen, some guys make that seamless transition, but the majority of guys really struggle with that. They miss, and you'll hear a lot of guys say it. I don't miss the game so much as I miss the guys. I miss that family atmosphere you have in the locker room. A lot of guys, like, honestly, people say you miss the guy. I don't freaking miss it at all. I don't.
It's the camaraderie.
The first couple of years I did.
Yeah,
but the camaraderie is what I really struggle with getting out. But that being said, I looked other places for it in the bar room. Oh, hello, guy. Hey, what's up? I kind of got that same thing there. But, and, let's think, let me see, clients, and I don't want to get into your clients per se, but have you had any people that you work with that think they have a strong relationship with self and they come to you and they find out, I guess I don't?
Yeah. Well, that happens. But I always say, well, you're in here for a reason. I didn't ask you to come. So you're in here for a reason.
But if
I feel...
Could you, here for a reason. So if someone comes through your doors to see you, does it mean they don't have a good relationship with themselves? It could.
No.
It all starts there?
No, it doesn't mean that they don't have one, but I always think we can improve the relationship with ourselves. Everyone who walks into my office, that's why, the book is Unfuck Your Life and Relationships, because I believe our mental health hinges on the quality of relationships we have. We can't get away from them. We can't escape them. The primary one with ourselves, like I said earlier, when people walk into my office, most of them, 99.9%, are coming in with a relational issue, something that's gone awry, something that's gone bad, and ultimately connects with themselves. Something has happened to them in their relationship, and then I'm often thinking, okay, well, let's talk about how this makes you feel, and what does it trigger inside of you, and how are we going to work on it? Because Tim, as you said earlier, that process only ends when we die. And there's a quote in my book, and I can't remember the woman who said it, but it's about we can be a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time. And I believe that to the core. We all are. Even myself, I've had all this therapy and life experiences. I know stuff, but still in my own personal life, day-to-day stuff, I fuck things up too. And I think, oh my God, I thought I was done. We're never done. So getting back to your question is, there is always a process of, okay, I got to tweak this about myself. I thought I was pretty unfucked, but that part of me, that little girl just came unfucked, and I got to put her back in her place. And it's an improvement and tweaking all along the way of journey of life. And I don't know if you guys had time to read the preface of the book, and I don't want to totally give it away, but in the preface, I share a story, but it's a very significant story in that it speaks to exactly what I'm talking about in terms of we think we have worked our issues out at some point, and then something happens in our life and we think, oh my God, I thought I had unfucked that, but that was totally a repetition of that. And how did that still happen to me? It still does. We still get triggered by things. And that little inner child of ours gets triggered and comes to the forefront. And then we need to work. In my scenario, I had to work with her and say, wait a minute, get back in there. You're not going to dominate this. As soon as I became aware that that's what was happening to me, I quickly unfucked it and I moved forward in the direction that I needed to and I wanted to go in, if that answers your question. Because, I always think, okay, I've worked on a lot of my issues. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's
Anita,
progress, not perfection.
Let me help you for a second, Anita.
Yeah.
You're allowed to be a masterpiece and a work in progress simultaneously.
Absolutely. And we all
Where
are.
did that come
believe
from?
We all are. My book.
That came from the preface.
You read the preface.
I wanted to sound a little psychoanalytical.
Thank you, Chris. You read the preface. No, I know you read a lot about it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I did. And it's awesome.
But it just highlights it because people say,
certainly-
"Oh my God, you must have perfect relationships. You must have this." I'm like, no, I don't. I've worked on myself for a long time, but I still get triggered. I still slip. But the important part is I become aware of it and I fix it very quickly rather than, be stuck in it for another year or whatever. That's key.
It's like the more I continue to go, like I've realized like the less I actually knew. Like I keep finding out more of how wrong I am, right?
Yeah.
But in a good way. Like that what I think, 99% of what I think the scenario is going to play out never happens.
Well, you don't know. And you're right. Yeah, and you're right. The more we know, the more we realize there's so much more to know about ourselves and the world. And that's keeping an open mind, which is, always healthy for relationships, having an open mind.
Okay. Now, curious on this one. We had a guest on here. I won't say his name, but he's a former athlete, hockey player. He suffers from OCD, but he's also a drug addict and an alcoholic. So how can, just forget the drug addict alcoholic part if we can, just say he was just OCD. How can a disease like OCD affect someone's relationships in life? Like, you're getting married. Say you're getting married. You got OCD. Yeah. And you got to work on those things. I get it. But how can that negatively affect the relationship?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about his situation, so I will not comment on his particular OCD, but I will say in general, people I will say in general that overall people use these clinical terms very loosely. I would say, okay, first you'd have to be officially diagnosed with OCD and how they impact the relationship. And, I'm recalling some people, a couple I worked with, 20 years ago. So I'm not breaching any confidentiality because I'm not naming anybody. It was a long time ago. That how literally she could not go to work because of the OCD and was fired a job after job. She would literally she'd get in her car. She would like, oh shit, I left the iron on. Literally would have to go back and forth 4, 5, 6 times where she'd be late for work. And eventually she would get fired this was happening repeatedly. And her partner at one point says, I can't deal with this because as a couple, people have financial agreements, obligations, all that kind of stuff. It interferes in every aspect of your relationship. And of course, the relationship falls apart. She did get better over time with therapy and was working on, and OCD, there's some, I don't push medication, but, medication is there for a reason and it does work. I always say, well, if you had diabetes, you would take insulin. So certain people do need medication to control some diagnoses and help them manage it. And in her situation, we did use some. She was prescribed some medication through a psychiatrist, and we work hand in hand together. When it comes to medication, I just want to say as a side note, the highest rate of efficacy is really when we combine it with talk therapy. I hate it when people come into my office and they've been on a pill, and I'm like, well, for how many years? 10. I'm like, well, how do you know that you still need it? They're like, oh, I've never even thought about that, because the doctor just, all due respect to doctors, because they're, I have some friends who are physicians and they're excellent doctors. Some drug dealers, but there are doctors who would just keep giving Prozac and I'll say, well, how do you know you still need this? And they're like, oh yeah, that's true. I never thought about it. It's been 10 years. Have you? And I think, okay, well, that's a different conversation. But so I just want to say, generally speaking, whether it's OCD, whether it's anxiety, if you have something, you're diagnosed with it. Even if you're not diagnosed, it just means, clinician hasn't put that label on you. It's really about managing it. And once, there needs to be intervention when whatever it is that you have starts to interfere with your social functioning, meaning going out with people, your emotional functioning, your relational functioning, where you're having lots of relational issues, and your vocational functioning, where you don't go to work anymore because of your anxiety is so high you can't get out of bed. So when it starts to interfere with your functioning, then you need professional help. And then hopefully with a combination of therapy and medication only if needed, that stops interfering with your day-to-day life.
Tim, did you get that? Did you turn the volume up there? You need professional help?
Why? Yeah, what are you trying to say? Hey, what are you trying to say? Just say it.
I'm trying to say I need it. I'm trying to say I need it. Apparently, no.
You know, one of the things in my books is just say it. Don't fuck mind games, right? Just say it. One of my chapters, right? Unfuck mind reading, right? No more mind reading. Just say
yeah.
it.
So.
So. What do you
God,
want to say?
I love this. I could just.
I know.
We could talk on and on.
Seriously.
It's interesting. But Tim, you were going to say something and you stopped. Or sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah,
I don't know. I was going to say
ahead,
something
Timothy.
stupid, probably. I was going to.
No,
I was
say something stupid. We'll tell you if it is.
Hey, it's okay.
No,
I will.
No. I. Oh, shoot.
Hey,
Never
hi,
mind.
Barry.
I have one question. Can I butt in
Hey,
for a
Anita,
second?
you're fucked.
Oh, hey.
I was kidding.
I think I have
Very
a
good.
recording that
You
says
can't
This is
unfuck
unfuck
this.
things.
This is
No.
very
You can't
seriously, I'm
unfuck Barry.
loving it.
That's
I'll try.
So at the beginning, you said family of origin.
Come on, Barry.
Go ahead, Barry.
I wanted to just get an idea of your definition of family of origin because
Oh, okay.
I wasn't sure you were meaning the actual family you grew up in, or was it a cultural thing of
No.
Growing
your
up.
French, Indian, Persian, Jewish,
no,
or whatever.
So family of
actual
origin,
family.
family of origin in mental health and psychotherapy means your parents. Like your parents who fucked you up in your family of origin. So you got to get unfucked. It's your parents, your siblings, and they might not be your biological parents. They might be somebody, you had to live with because your original parents couldn't take care of you. I've had that happen. Aunts and uncles, you might have grown up with them. So it's where you grew up, your family of origin is where we learn all of this stuff. Yeah, there's our hardcore personality that we come out with. But I think in terms of relationships and how we handle our emotions, negative and positive, really is a function of how were we taught? Did your parents tell you to shut the fuck up and not talk? Like my dad basically said, stop talking. You'll probably say something stupid. So I grew up with that inside my head. Like today, you'd be like, what? But there was a time in my life where I didn't speak. Like I know it's impossible to imagine that now because now I can't shut the fuck up. But literally my father would say to me, and this was until I was like 18, 19 years old. He would say, before that, don't say anything. And especially if we have people over, he's like, don't say anything. You probably say something stupid and embarrass me. So just sit there. And I literally would just sit there. And I remember, you'll read this in my book, going out into the world, I would just sit there and be like, well, is she fucking deaf, mute, or what the fuck's wrong with it? The girl doesn't speak. Because I carried that, my dad's voice in my head, and I formed a whole belief system about myself from that message that I carried into the world until people in the outside world said, what's going on over here? And I'm like, I don't know. But then I can go back, I can pinpoint where that actually came from. It was pretty blatant.
And what's awesome though is you said in the beginning, like your parents, they did the best they could with what they were given. It's like you don't blame that,
no,
right?
I
so
don't.
it's just kind of like, there's no judgment on that. That takes a lot. I think that's that's the
but
whole
you can
goal
only,
is like,
I think,
right.
And I only reached that level as later on in my life when I could see my parents as adults and not as my parents. That's a very different perception and view of your parents. If you think about them like, okay, my dad, and if you read the story of migration of my dad and his life, I think, oh my God, like all the shit that goes on in the world today. And I hear of some of the stuff, I think that man suffered greatly, but look what he did in his life, right? People are so helpless today. He was never a victim or helpless. But he became, I think, very depressed in his life, and he didn't have the help that we have available today. And and maybe if he did, he wouldn't have gone because it's a male thing, Depression is huge. And then I want to share, because I'm with, 3 men over here, that depression in men manifests itself very differently to depression in women. Women, number one symptom, they're sad, and we're able to say we're sad. We look sad, we embrace it, right? It's a cultural thing, socialization. Men often, the symptoms of depression, they manifest in anger, irritation. They start doing stupid things like, motorcycles, driving crazy, angry, hiding, all of a sudden become very isolating themselves. And people will say, I've worked with couples, well, he's just a jerk. He's always so angry all the time. And then through working with him and the couple, I realized he's not angry. He's just very depressed. And this is the way the depression is being expressed. And we need to be very cognizant of that. And why? because when it comes to suicide, although women attempt suicide far greater than men, men are much more successful at it because they use things like guns. I mean, so it's really important that we as a society start looking at male depression. Oops, somebody's phone.
Oh my
so we
God.
need to look at
Barry's never.
Hey,
Barry's.
you totally
he's
fucked
never
it up
been.
for me.
Barry's
Barry's
never been depressed.
Unfuck this podcast.
Yeah, totally
He's
fucked it
never
up. I
been
was gonna-
depressed. Barry's never been depressed. He has no idea what you're talking about.
So just getting back to the importance of why we need to be able to identify diagnosis and treat it. And then just looking at our parents, and I look at my dad and I think, okay, he suffered with depression. And as a child, you can't see, I wasn't able to see that. I'm trying to, live my life and find my way. But as an adult looking back, and especially in writing this book, I see it very clearly. And I think, I have a lot of respect for that guy.
Yeah. Listen, I did some that family of origin work, that inner child work when I was in treatment. I took an intensive therapy I was in it for 2 weeks. And it was some of the best learning experiences I've ever had in my life. Now, when I look back and just talking about your situation and talking about depression, but I look at, when we look at, let's say, alcoholism and drug addiction, and you talk about family, and I never wanted to look at my parents like, oh, they were the problem. I had to look at the reality of it, what I was in, and realize, and looking back now and seeing how it's transgenerational, that it started way before my mom and dad.
Right.
And it just gets passed and passed and passed, like yourself, until someone's willing to break the cycle. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And it's same with alcoholism, and same like with your life now. You would have been married off. You stood up against that. Absolutely. And you went a whole different direction.
I did.
And you broke that cycle in your family.
And don't give my book away. Stop it.
Does that make sense?
I was just going to say, don't give the story away.
That's coming from my family of origin work I did.
Absolutely. And you're making a really good point. When I do therapy with people, I like to have, and I ask them, let's do it's called a genogram. We're going to get geeky and clinical about it, but it is
the
really
table. Have you done the table?
Oh, not the table yet. This is a genogram, but basically it's what you're talking about. It's a family tree, but what it encompasses is all the psychological problems that have been transferred from one generation to another, addictions that have gone from one generation to another. And you look at that lineage and you think, okay, well, in my generation, I'm going to do something so it does not repeat itself. And I don't pass this down because it's not something that I want to pass down. But in order to do that, we have to look at it. And Chris, kudos to you that you saw that it wasn't just your parents, it went beyond that. And you were just part of this link. And then you had to break it somewhere, in that link. Good for you.
Yeah, it's like you don't, it's like you see the trend, but it's like, truthfully, you don't have to be that way. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's how, right. And that's where I think it's, like with, you don't have to be a victim and, I don't know.
No, I'm always a survivor.
Keep going, Tim. Keep going.
Tim,
sure.
you're making a very good point.
You get going and then you jump. Don't,
Well, I'm just
dive in the deep end, Tim.
Go ahead, Tim.
No,
I'm be in the shallow end the rest of your life.
I don't want to send you guys an invoice. I don't want to charge you guys for this.
This is not therapy. Let me just say, this is not therapy.
No, I'm kidding. Well, no. I'm just saying. I just no. I don't know where I was going with that. I was just saying, I think whatever you're feeling, and I mean whatever anyone's feeling, it's like the truth is if you really want to, you don't have to feel that way. It just that takes a lot of it takes help. It takes help sometimes.
Yeah,
right?
and nobody wants to feel that.
I think Jewel, I think about. Sorry, what? Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tim.
No, I was gonna say I was thinking I listened to this one podcast with Jewel, and she was on Joe Rogan, and she was talking about how she was like just looking around and it's like everything changes, right? And it's like we think we can't. It's like you get in that permanent. Sometimes you can get depressed and you think the whole world is depressing, but it's just. you don't have to feel that way. It's a lot easier said than done. I
Yes,
don't
it
know.
is.
Like I said, I'm rambling and I'm making no
No,
points.
no,
but I'm
what
just-
you're saying is
Chris
really
told me to
valuable.
talk, and when Chris tells me what to do, I do
Then
it.
you do that. Oh my God, you're Chris's bitch now, right?
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I
Never
know how
been
this
my
is working
bitch,
out.
Tim.
No.
No, but
I'm
I want
kidding.
to.
I'm
But
kidding.
you're making a really good point. I want to just speak to that. Can't, this whole thing about I can't change people, can't change. I always, doing what I do, I have to believe my profession is based on the concept of change. And I think if you want to change, you will work hard enough to be different, to be in a different place than where you are today. Change is a huge word. People are threatened by it. They're scared of it. They want it, but at the same time, they run away from it. Because when we are wanting to change or wanted to get help to change, then we're going into a very unfamiliar place. And, unfamiliar place scares us. Talking about fear, some of us rather live in our misery, which is very comfortable and known to us. Those are the people who always complain, but they never do anything with their life. And I'm not one of those people, as you probably already know, that if you want to change, you can make the change, and you have to take concrete steps to make that change happen. And you have to be ready to get comfortable with the unknown, because what's on the other side of what you've been doing for so many years, your narrative, you're stuck in that narrative about yourself and about the world. In order to rewrite your narrative, you have to be able to put yourself out there. You have to, and you don't know what's going to be out there.
You got to do things you don't want to do.
Absolutely. And going for therapy sometimes is not what people want.
Yeah. I could sound how I'm sounding right now. It's great, but I can, in 5 minutes after this, I could go right into my mode of like, I don't want to talk to anybody. Right. But I know, I'm aware today though, that's the old me, like wanting to isolate. Like I'm still going to have that, but
right.
So I guess,
but you take small steps every day. I believe that, people say, oh, psychoanalysis takes 4 years. Yes, it does. But the way I work with people is I always say, okay, well, let's explore the past so we can get some understanding. So exploration is important for me. Understanding is important. And then, all of that needs to lead to some kind of concrete change. So yeah, we can explore your past and see the relevance of maybe why you do what you do. But at the same time, I need to be able to help you on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis to make small changes. And sometimes people they're stuck in the why. And this is really important thing to talk about. Well, why do I do this? I'm like, okay, well, let's try, let's delve into the past. And sometimes we can't figure out the why, and people get stuck in the why. And I say to those people, and people watching and listening today, sometimes the why, we can't get to it and it doesn't matter, but we can't be stuck there. If we can't answer the why, we can answer the what, which is we need to make the change, and this is how we're going to change it. Because people do like, oh, why? I've been stuck in the why for 5 fucking years. We're not going to do that anymore. We don't know why, but we do know what. What needs to change?
Here's one for you. Now, and listen.
Why does Barry keep coming on?
No.
Yeah, what happened?
Jamie and I, in my personal relationship with Jamie, when we first started dating and then we're living together, we had a situation in the home where I snapped the wire. Wasn't good. I scared her. I scared the dogs. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then right away, I felt bad. We talked about it. And she said, Chris, I'm in, kudos to her. She said, I can't stay in this relationship if that's going to be something I'm going to have to face again. And you need to do something about it. And she got my attention. And I did do something about it. My golden retriever had an incredible impact on me. Other than Jamie, my dog was incredible in helping me get through those issues. Now, I will watch a hockey game, and the least tense I got if a goal, and I went, that dog will come next to me and sit there and look at me like, please don't do that again. And he was really cognizant of my mood, my feelings, and was always there for me. That unconditional love. Yes. Now, do you think unconditional love is achievable, or it's even a thing in relationship?
I think in parental relationships, it is.
With the dog, maybe, but I'm saying with
the dog.
Jamie. Me and Jamie.
Well, with your partner, no, because you might cross some boundaries that are unacceptable for her. And should she have to love you unconditionally for that? I believe not. And that would fall apart anyway. If you continue to behave like that, unless, and people do have sadomasochistic relationships where they're totally fucked up in the relationship, but neither one wants to leave. But that's symbiotic. And that's a whole nother conversation we can have at a later time. But if you continue to breach people's physical and emotional boundaries and they respect themselves enough, like if that was you and I'd be like, okay, Chris, I've given you multiple chances. You keep doing this. Either you unfuck this stuff or I'm going to be out because I respect myself more than this. And if you loved me, you would respect me, but clearly you don't. So go get some help. And if and you did apologize, you owned it, and that's part of it. And you didn't go into, oh my God, you're just crazy. You don't get me. You didn't attack back. You stopped. It sounds like you stopped. You thought about it and you took responsibility.
I felt like shit.
Yeah.
I felt terrible. And then for me was what was the real kicker for me was after a few years, the validation from Jamie that, you know what? You did do something about it. I'm so happy. I'm so proud of you that you addressed it, which honestly for me, then I'm like, and that just helped me immensely in my life, what she did. And she did have that boundary, and
good for her. Yeah.
I'm not patting myself on the back. Oh, I did something about it, but I did because I value and love her.
Yes.
Like no one else.
You respect the relationship and and I would say to people, if the relationship matters to you and you want the relationship in your life, what are you willing to do for it? People always want the other person to change for the other person, because I have to hear this, oh, my partner doesn't love me, or they're like, well, how do you show them love? What is this about your relationship being a place that you go to only to get? What are you giving to the relationship yourself that you might get love in return? So this whole thing about unconditional love from my partner, that's fucked up, because if you're not being kind, respectful of my boundaries and appreciating me, that's not going to work. That's going to be an abusive relationship, and that's not love.
Abusive and maybe codependent a little.
Well, the codependency is a whole new subject. I mean, I don't, people are, I sometimes feel like, okay, let's go there on a different podcast.
That's fine.
What is codependency?
No, I feel like, I feel like.
Are we really all dependent on each other? I don't know. But sorry. Tim, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that I find out like more and more like that, men and women are different. Like my wife, I could really get like, oh, my wife, she asks me every morning, you see my phone, right? Like, and I'm like, my wife. But then like my buddy says, his wife does the same thing. And I'm like, okay, well, you know what? Women are different than men. And it's not, I don't have a wife problem. I just got to understand that, she's different than I am. And
well, it's accepting differences.
That has helped me. Like,
it's accepting.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Whatever we're dealing with, it's accepting the fact that no one is a mirror image of ourselves, emotionally, physically, unless you're a twin, you are. But no one is. And then we have to accept the fact that that other person has a different perspective on things. And we have to, if we want the relationship to work and to be healthy, we have to allow for that to exist in our coupleship. And I think that society does relationships, marriage, whatever it is, a coupleship disservice by promoting this union and this fusion, this oneness. We should all be in love and be one. That's a bunch of bullshit, because it sets us up for failure, because then we think our partner should think and feel what we do. And when they don't, we think that's fucked up. That's not what I married, or that's not what because it was supposed to be about a oneness. I'm like, no, two identities exist. Both identities need to respect each other's existence and nurturance and helping them to fly, because throughout the relationship, our identity changes. We all change. If it's a long-term relationship, we are going to change, and we have to allow for that space of change for ourselves and for our partner. So this oneness, this fusion is bullshit. Yeah. Difference is important. Acknowledging and respecting differences. We have to be able to do that.
Anita, I got to tell you, this has been just awesome talking to you, getting some insights on how to, folks. And if you want to know how to unfuck your life and your relationships, you make sure you pick up this book by Anita Astley, Unfuck Your Life and Relationships. You can go to Anita's website if you want and check out her website, askanitaastley.com. You can get this book again, Simon & Schuster, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, BAM, Books A Million, B Bookshop, IndieBound, to name a few. Once again, it comes out December 6th. And you can also follow Anita on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube under Ask Anita Astley. And Anita, just awesome to have you today. It was so much fun.
Thank you so much.
Now I'm cured. Yeah. I'm going to have the best relationships in the world with my mailman.
I'm always right.
Hey, I never said that. Hey, don't get ahead of yourself. I never said that.
Wait, real quick. Who's your favorite Habs player? Who is your favorite Habs player?
Oh, I can't say. It was Patrick Roy.
No.
You know, I don't know. I have to give a shout out to my brother for connecting us. Can I do that, please?
Sunil's the best.
Yeah. Can we? He's my younger brother, but he's 10 years younger than me. I'm like his mom. I love that kid. So can I share a story? Do we have time? So
Go right ahead.
I had left home, I don't know how old he was. He has this picture on his wall. He said, my mom didn't drive. So Patrick Roy was coming to Zellers. You guys remember Zellers? It was in Point Claire. So he didn't have anybody to take. I said, I'll take you, kid. Come on, let's go. So we got in the car together. And keep in mind, he's 10 years younger than me. So he's walking next to me. He's all excited. It was the best moment in his life, right? So literally we walk in the store and Patrick Roy was right next to me. I didn't even know it was the guy. And my brother says, oh my God, that's Patrick Roy. I'm like, really? So I take out my camera. I flash up and Patrick really was like, hey, such a nice guy. And then
no boundaries.
We speak. Yeah, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know. Hey, I was really young. So to this day, he remembers and he has a picture of that moment in his Habs cave. You guys, Chris, you've seen it. He's the
I'm
biggest
going there
Habs
Saturday
fan.
night.
Are you? Yeah, there's a fundraiser, right?
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna go.
If I was able to go, I would totally attend. But yeah, I just want to give a shout out. He's an amazing brother and the biggest Habs fan I know.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy. Lot of fun. I went over and checked out the cave.
Yeah.
And I gave him a hard time because he had everybody's jersey in there, other than all the Hall of Famers, none of the slugs. Yeah. So he eventually went out and got my jersey. And
there was a reason. He told you why. Well,
I guilted him.
There was
I guilted him into getting my jersey.
He's a super
awesome
brother.
guy. Yeah.
He's an awesome guy.
Yeah,
he's
he
my
is.
brother. Kudos. And I want to thank you. Thanks to him that, we got this podcast going. So thank you so much, guys, for having me on. And of course, bringing awareness to mental health, relationships, and especially, with athletes and so forth. We all got to get unfucked sometimes.